everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show. It's Game 162 edition, as all the teams around the league will start off in the afternoon today in the final game of the season. I'm Rich Baxter. I'm joined with the great Mr. Gary Mack. How are you, Gary?
Hello, Rich. It's great to be back with you again. And yeah, final game of the season, 162. And Rich, we still got some exciting races that we don't know what's going to happen yet. So we've got a lot of the details already about who's going to be playing who or some, but there's some key details yet and yet to be determined today.
Yeah, as we were talking about a little bit before the show, and welcome back, by the way. I'm glad everything's going well for you. Glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Tough to do the show on your own. I did an audio only show last week, so rambled on a little bit about stuff, but it's great to have you back. And yeah, game 162, hard to believe the season's over. We made it all through a 21 season that was pretty good. As far as still being in the COVID situation and that having, its impact on baseball. But we're talking a little bit about the game 162 here, and we could have a little chaos after today's action.
We could have a lot of chaos, Rich. We got the in both leagues, the National League, San Francisco, Milwaukee, and Atlanta are in the playoffs. They've clinched playoff spots. Milwaukee and Atlanta have clinched their division. San Francisco, who has the most wins in the division, has not clinched the division yet, simply because the Dodgers are hot on their tail. And with San Francisco losing last night and the Dodgers winning, the Dodgers are a game behind. So they are one game behind with one left to play. So they technically could tie for the division. So that's going to be, that would be a playoff game there. And then the wild card would be set more or less the loser of that game and the St. Louis Cardinals. So not, National League wild card's not that. But the interesting thing is the wild card in the American League. There's a possibility of a four-way tie. The Yankees and Boston are tied for the top, technically, the top wild card spot. And then right behind them is Seattle and Toronto are tied for, I guess, the getting in there. But they're only a game behind. So if Seattle and Toronto win and the Boston and the Yankees lose, we would have a four-way tie. A lot of things have to fall right for that to happen. But if you remember a few years ago, we had that whole mishmash where there were teams tied all over the place, and we had all these little playoff games going on and stuff, and it was like really, and the only way the one team got in was like 4 or 5 teams had to lose or something. I forget what it was, but it happened, and that team snuck into the playoffs. So you never know. We could have a four-way tie in the AL wild card. Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would be great. And I love when the season comes down to this. All the teams starting off around 307, 305 today. So it'll be an even start for all the teams. You won't have a result coming in sooner than another, usually with this. And I think it's great that they're starting at the same time this year. And as you said, Gary, there's so many races to be determined out there in San Francisco. They couldn't put it away with a win. The Padres came back and beat them. Yeah. And lo and behold, the Padres, rumor is that they'll be firing their manager right after the season. So here they get a decisive win to block the Giants from taking the title out there. And Jace Tingler apparently hanging by a thread for his job out there in San Diego, according to all sources.
Well, Rich, they made a lot of moves and they really built that team up, and they were in this race. I guess since most of the way, but then since the All Star break has killed a number of teams. They've been awful since the All Star break. The Mets have been awful since the All Star break. These teams were in their division hunt. Then they were definitely a wild card, and then they just fell off the face of the earth. San Diego, with that kind of talent, I guess they spent a lot of money. They thought this was going to be year they would get a wild card spot, at least get into the playoffs. And lo and behold, the Giants come out of nowhere and put together a team that's just been a juggernaut most of the season. The only team they couldn't shake were the Dodgers, and they're still trying to shake the Dodgers. So um, the Padres are not happy out there, and you contrast that to Seattle. I don't know if you caught any of that game, but they're going nuts there because they're in a playoff race for the first time in 20 years or so. So, very interesting last weekend. And as depressing as it has been for us with our teams being eliminated, uh, this weekend kind of doesn't make up for it, but it just instills your love of the game again, because this is what it's all about. And if our teams would watch these other teams and maybe learn how to build a team that could actually withstand this 162 game season and play the game the way it's supposed to be played, maybe they'd be in the playoffs. But that's another show, Rich. So, uh, but yeah, San Diego was, they have all that what talent they have, and uh,
Yeah.
and on the other hand, Toronto, they're doing a terrific job, even though they weren't really expected to be there this season, I don't think, and they're right there fighting for a wild card. So good luck to them, and they've got a lot of talent as well.
Yeah. The Blue Jays are almost like the Padres of the National League. They have a lot of young players that are, you know, taking over, so to speak, here. Vlad Guerrero Jr., of course, on that team, and a few others. So, yeah, you got an interesting comparison between both teams, the Padres and the Blue Jays. So maybe next year we'll see them with a more solid role getting into the playoffs, perhaps. And, it's made baseball exciting because sometimes as you uh, trans transgress into a new set of superstars, you get new teams involved, and it makes it a little more fun.
Yeah, you're right, Rich, and I was just thinking that what would happen if Boston wins? I'm trying to do math in my head, always a dangerous thing, and the Yankees lose,
And they
and
could.
Seattle and Toronto win, and then there'd be a three-way tie. And how the heck would that playoff? Let's see. There's an article in the MLB about just this thing. If there was a tie, I
Yeah, looking around the opponents for the Yankees, of course, they're playing the Rays, so it's quite possible that they could lose.
that's true.
And the Boston Red Sox are playing the lowly Nationals, so you have to give them the nod for a possible win this afternoon. And let's see who else is the matchup we're looking at. The Angels and the Mariners are squaring off today. So you have to look at the Mariners of being the favorite in that game. So yeah, the Yankees of the four teams, the Yankees have the toughest road because they're playing Tampa Bay.
Right, right. And well, they're home, so that helps. But as you said, Tampa Bay and Tampa Bay would like to eliminate the Yankees, or at least make it as tough for them as possible. They're not resting. I mean, they went after them full bore this weekend. They beat them 2 games, so 2 out of 3 so far. So they're ready to beat them. But this is a. I'm just reading some of this, and it's just kind of convoluted, Rich. So I don't know if we want to get into it on a 4-way tie, but oh boy.
Yeah, we better let it shake out this afternoon. Then
Yeah.
we'll talk about next week. You have to be a trigonometry major to figure this out.
Yeah, my advice would be go to MLB the site and look for the article. It's explaining AL wildcard tiebreaker scenarios. Team get designated based on winning percentage of games against I don't know who, and then they get to choose who they play. I guess I don't know, or A, B, C, D, and then A gets to choose who they wish to play. We'll see.
Here's
We'll find out. Just tell me when and where, and there is the breakdown of who will be playing once we get the wild card figured out.
yeah. St. Louis, of course, running the table at the end of the season. I think they won 17 in a row, maybe. I haven't saw if
Yeah,
they won 18 in a row, but they basically barged their way into the playoffs here and may be a suitable opponent for some of these teams that have, sort of ran the table themselves in the season. Here, if you're watching the YouTube, just put up the postseason picture as of now. Of course, unofficial because those races haven't been figured out. But Tampa Bay is
yeah,
waiting to play the winner of a wild card. The White Sox and Houston will face off in the ALDS, and San Francisco is waiting for a wild card. And then it looks like the Braves and the Brewers will get together in an ALDS. So not going to be easy for the Braves. And as we talked about before the show, the Phillies had a chance, 3-game series against the Braves. They came up empty, losing all 3, fell out of the race for a wild card, or the division, actually, I should say.
yeah.
And, it's a long season for a lot of teams. Let's talk a little bit about that as we look at some of the records and teams that have lost 100 games or more, being the Baltimore Orioles. How do you remain, really an Oriole fan when your team loses 100 games in a season? Who else lost 100 games? It looks like the Texas Rangers lost 100 games or more this year. The Pirates 100 games or more. So you got 3 teams there. I wonder how those fans feel. Can't even, losing 100 games is a lot of games to lose.
Well, I think they really in the 2 of the 3 cities. I'm not sure about Pittsburgh, but they expected. I think Pittsburgh probably expected it as well. They know they stripped their teams, that they're rebuilding. And I think if you're honest with the fans and tell them we're in a rebuilding mode, this is what we're doing, fans will understand. It's when a rebuild lasts for 8 years, or you're close, and then you keep adding, and something doesn't mesh, and like the Mets now. The Mets 6 years ago were in the World Series, and did they blow up the whole team? No, but they slowly got rid of. There's not a lot of guys that were on that team remain now, and they may be few even next year. Who knows? But I guess the point is they keep trying to add these pieces, thinking this is the piece and that's the piece. Sometimes you have to admit defeat, and you have to blow it up and start over again. And I think people understand that. The fans will understand that as long as you show progress. it's when you keep failing and keep failing, and Texas has been a pretty good organization over the years. They've been in a lot of playoffs. They haven't gotten there yet, but they've been in the playoffs and ran into the Yankees in the '90s. If you remember, they seem to be playing the Yankees every year, and Baltimore too. They were in there, so Baltimore's a little bit tougher because of the owner, and he's not well liked. So that makes it a little bit more difficult, and it's kind of a shame to see Camden Yards. That you could never get a ticket for that place,
Yeah.
and now it's half empty. It's kind of sad to see that, but they're awful, and um, but they have players that people want, so that tells you that there's something going on there. That they have some young players, and hopefully they'll be able to emerge from this in the next few years and at least be a contender and go from there. You were speaking about Atlanta a minute ago, and they're an interesting team because they're a really good team and they're built to win a division, but I don't think they can go much further. I don't think they're built to win it all. And um, I look at the Giants and the Dodgers, and I don't, and Milwaukee even to some extent. I think Milwaukee has a shot. I think they're built more for the playoffs and everything, but I don't I don't see that when I look at Atlanta, and I really didn't see it in any of the Eastern Division teams, to be honest. Even the Mets, even if the Mets had gotten there, I don't think they would have gotten past the first round or so. Um, but you never know. A team gets hot. Uh, I didn't think St. Louis was a playoff team, but they've put it together the last. So you never know what could happen. But I wouldn't guess they would get very far. Uh, I would think it would be LA and the Giants battling it out pretty much through the whole playoffs. Same thing with Tampa Bay. I think they're built for everything, but we've seen them in the past, and how they do it with a low payroll is amazing to me. They must have some brilliant farm system, um, and I think it seems to work together because when you hire some of their guys separately, they don't seem to have the same magic. So whatever it is, just seems to work down there. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's amazing, as you said, winning 100 games this year. And I have some cousins that live in Florida, and I always see them posting about Tampa. They live in the Tampa area. And year after year, I just keep seeing the same posts from them. Another great season, 100 wins. They even offload some of their best players and bring other ones in and still accomplish the
Yeah.
same win total. So it's amazing what they're doing down there. It's got to be people that are making it happen behind the scenes, people that we don't know the names of, obviously, but yeah, they know how to pick up good baseball players. um, Little Florida news as well. And by the way, I just wanted to add Arizona into that 100 game losing club. I don't think I mentioned them, but they're at 107 losses so far this year. But getting back to Florida, news in surfacing this week that the Marlins are apparently going to be looking for some good players in the offseason. That was from the GM down there, and CEO Derek Jeter has echoed those comments. And he said, quote, "For the first time, really, since we've been here as an ownership group, I expect to be pretty active." So that's his quote there, as far as trying to shore up the Marlins, get some good things happening down there in Florida, southern Florida.
Yeah, and they've got a pretty good team. I mean, they're young and they've drafted well. They've got a good farm system, and I would be concerned about them because they're doing everything, we everybody got on Jeter, and rightfully so, I guess, when he first took over. But we all figured he don't know what the hell he's doing. And I think he's going to have the last laugh on all of us because he's really, uh, you know, built something. They have a very good young pitching staff. They've got some good young players. They need some better players, and I think if they do that, they could be a threat. Next year, at least to the Braves and the Mets and the Phillies. Um, so it'll be interesting this off season, to
Yeah.
watch what the teams in our division, the Eastern Division, actually do because they it's going to be fascinating to see whether or not who makes the moves. Miami's ready to move now. The other teams have got to counteract that, and or they've got to decide to blow their teams up, like the Nationals, which practically did blow their team up at the trading deadline by trading their big names, and probably was a good move for them. Um, and the Mets did nothing. And I think the Phillies are in a slightly different spot. I don't think they're quite ready to blow it all up yet, because they have some young players that they've moved in, and I think they may need another a little experience, but they have to shore up their bullpen and probably add another top line or a number 3, 4 starter or so. But they've made some moves over the next couple of years, but their window is starting to close, and that window doesn't stay open long. I think the window on the Mets is closed as well. But who knows? You make some moves nowadays, and you could win a division. Look at the Giants, right?
That's true. Yeah, as you said, the Phillies, they had a chance to do something this year at the trade deadline. It was like a couple band-aids put on the team. They did bring in some relievers that made a difference a little bit, but there was 30 some odd blown saves over the season. Now imagine just a quarter less of those blown saves. They'd be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I know.
So
Yeah.
it's a shame. And you could probably look at, individual teams like that all around the league. And it's just that little extra piece of the puzzle that needs to be tweaked sometimes with these teams. And we'll see if it happens for the Phils next year, but it's always next year. So uh, as the years grow on, that distance becomes larger. So you
Yeah.
don't make the playoffs.
Yeah. No, I said I think most of the year that if the Phillies had a bullpen, they would have been in first place by about 5, 6 games, I believe, and they would have won this division. But they didn't have that piece, and that's what hurt them. And it's hard to get all the pieces together at the same time. Health is a big thing too. You could be have clicking on all cylinders, and then your bullpen is not good, and then maybe you get the bullpen in shape, and then a starter gets hurt or a key hitter gets hurt, and that knocks you right back again. So you just never know. You need the health and you need everything else to be clicking, but it's going to be a wild Sunday, Rich. And I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw this, that the Dodgers could be without Clayton Kershaw throughout these playoffs. They pulled him out of the game the other night. I think it was Friday night. After just throwing 42 pitches with what the team announced was left forearm discomfort, and that's not a good thing for the Dodgers going into the playoffs.
Right. Yeah. Not at all. And game 162 will explain it all here. going to be exciting. I know football's starting up. A lot of people are on the football bandwagon already. Their team's out of it. Let's just jump back into that blown saves category for a second, because I brought up a nice stat here on the YouTube channel. If you're watching, you could read along with it. And here's the top blown save leaders in the NL. Colorado with 8, all tied up. One guy, Mr. Bard, his name is. St. Louis, believe it or not, 8 blown saves by an individual pitcher. Milwaukee, 8 blown saves. Suter. The Mets, of course, Hand, 8 blown saves. So those are your top 4 pitchers of the season here as we go into game 162 that have blown 8 games for their team. That's a lot. And then you have here Hector Neris with 7 from the Phillies. So I'm well aware of his potential to blow a game. So,
and then we see Edwin Diaz, the Mets, who's blown 6, and I got to tell you, it seems like he's blown a lot more than just 6.
yeah.
But there you go. Just taking the Mets there, and you've got Hand with 8, and I don't remember Hand coming in that late of games, but Diaz is the closer, so you can understand the 6. So there's 14, and then Familia 6. That's 20 games. 20 games, Rich.
And if you look at this chart, as you just said, 20 games for the Mets, here's the only guy that you're going to see in the top 15 of blown saves for the Phillies. So that's going to tell you one thing. The Phillies have spread out blown saves amongst the rest of the bullpen. Right. And those guys weren't your closers, quote unquote, but they got blown up just the same, But that's amazing, that teams can blow this many games. And these are wins you're supposed to count on almost, shut the door on the team. You're up on the lead in a game. It's a shame.
Well, and look at it this way too. If you just took half of those games back, and I'll use the Mets as an example. 20 games they blew those 3 pitches, just those 3. There's more, but just those 20 games. Had they blown only 10 games, that's 10 more wins.
Yeah,
they would have been tied right now for the division lead. So you can, it's an interesting the stat right there. And the Phillies would be a game out if you look at Neris and he blew 7.
7, yeah.
So they'd still be they'd be right there. So it's an interesting game, and yet you look at a guy like Diaz and he's got the 32 saves.
Yeah.
So
double-edged sword, I think they call it.
Yeah, it really is. So, but it's an interesting stat.
There's our look at why our teams didn't do well. If you listen to the show, you know who they are. Of course, Gary does his Mets Musings podcast, and I do my Phillies talk. I had a nice rant on my last Phillies talk podcast. I was solo for that one, and I really let it loose at management. So if you get a chance, go over to Phillies Talk podcast with Rich Baxter. You can listen to that. But Gary, as I do each week here, or try to do each week, is share some of the stats with our listeners. And this week is no exception here. We got our listeners, 87% out of the U.S., 7% from United Kingdom. That's awesome. Thank you very much for tuning in. And then we have a smattering of other countries here: Mexico, Canada, Russia has made it up on the board. Ireland, Ecuador, and Japan. So maybe some expatriates living out there tuning in to the podcast.
Yeah.
And listening platforms, Apple
Very interesting.
Podcast, 69%. We've got the Amazon crew out there at 6%, Overcast at 3%. Google Podcasts have crept up. I don't think we've had a high number like that from Google Podcasts, 3%. That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
don't think so.
And then 19% have listened from other, listening platforms. Jump over to devices. iPhone, 63%. It's always a great place to listen to your podcasts. Android users, 8%. And smart speaker, that number's growing bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Every couple weeks we do the show. It's 7% now. And I'm surprised at this. The web, only 2% listen from the web to the podcast here. So
Yeah, I think the iPhone's the big thing. I mean, the phone, in general, you get 71% there if you combine the iPhone and the Android phone. So
yeah,
I think that's the people use their phones a lot more now, Rich.
yeah. They replace some computer devices at home. People don't need a big PC at home or a Mac anymore. They have one in their
Mm-hmm.
hand, walking
Right.
around with it.
Right.
All right. Breakdown on our male listeners, 81% female, 19. Thank you, ladies out there, for listening.
Mhm.
And we have a nice little progressive chart here on our listeners based upon age, which, ebbs and flows over the season. So,
Goes up and down.
yeah, source here is Spotify for those two categories. And thank you, Spotify. And of course, Anchor Podcast is where you can find the home of this show, anchor.fm/baseball talk radio show is where you find us. And there you can also support the show. There's a support button in the center here that you can click on. And you can go from 99 cents a month. That's less than a cup of coffee. If you want to go for, a Starbucks cup of coffee, you'd be at $4.99 a month. And that at our $9.99 per month level for sponsorship out there, we would mention either your business, if you have a business out there, or if you're a super supporter listener, we would mention you on the show, each show. And Gary, I just got one for Phillies Talk Podcast not too long ago, so I was excited at that. But we're still waiting for our Baseball Talk Radio listeners to jump on board on this, and it's gonna help us a little bit, guys.
Yeah, and it'll happen. It just takes a little bit of time. I think people are getting back into the groove of things, and uh, you know, doing that. And also, let me remind you, and if you're watching on YouTube, especially, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the show so you know when each new edition of the Baseball Talk Radio show comes out. And hit the like button too. It helps us with the YouTube analytics and whatever you want to call it there that they do. So go check that out as well. And hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. That's the big thing. So it helps us to grow the show and adds on to the community. And don't forget the Facebook page, facebook.com/baseball talk radio show. And Rich mentioned if you want to give us some support through Anchor, but we also have a Patreon page if you'd like to do it that way. Maybe you've done other shows or other things through Patreon and feel comfortable with that. We may not feel comfortable with Anchor. You can go to patreon.com/baseball talk and support the show that way. So, we could use your help, and any help that you give would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. And you can contact us individually. We take Cash App and Venmo. So you can email Gary at baseballtalkradio.com, Rich at baseballtalkradio.com to set that up. And we'd appreciate it very much because we want to keep bringing you this content. And it's not free, folks. It's not free. So we try to want to raise the bar and establish a nice community of supporters, which a lot of other podcasts have in different sports genres and different every other genre you could think of. They have supporters in their podcast, so we appreciate it.
And Rich, I think before we go, we have a sad story here. Did you hear about that woman and her child that fell from the about 6 stories at Petco Park, the home of the San Diego Padres, the other day? Really
Yes.
sad story. And
Yeah, it was on the show last week, actually.
Oh, okay. Now they've released some names and some witnesses accounts, and it's really it's a head scratcher in a way. Raquel Wilkins, 40, and Denzel Browning Wilkins, 2, fell from the dining concession area on the concourse level. You went over that last week. But here's the what they've come out with now. She announced on Facebook, the woman, earlier that day, that she was engaged and that the fiance was at the game. And witnesses said she started jumping on the bench and the table closest to the railing, holding the baby in the arms, the witness said, and she seemed happy and laughing. She lost her balance and fell off the bench, landing on a concourse, the witness says, remarking to her son that the woman and baby had almost tumbled over the railings. And here's the weird part. About 30 seconds to a minute later, the woman again jumped onto the bench of the picnic table with her son. According to the witness, who said she commented that she couldn't believe the woman had stood back on a bench after falling. She again, the woman on the table, again lost her balance and this time fell over the edge and over the railing. And why would you jump up on a picnic table near a railing that falls 6 feet down?
Yeah.
I mean, 6 stories down.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all. Unless, there was an attempt to do that, of course. You never know what's going through people's minds. And it did appear to be suspicious, of course, that activity. You have an adult holding a child that's, jumping up on a something that, you could topple over and fall. Just that's not normal, just to say.
No.
And what a shame. But, last week's show, I did talk a little bit about like some of the stadiums around the country. They're making them smaller, which is more intimate for the fans. But as you go higher, they get more pitched. The levels of the stands get more angled towards the ground, of course. And, at least in Philadelphia, you could probably lose your balance and topple over inside the stadium on certain areas of that stadium. I was very uncomfortable sitting up high. But this is another matter. This is something that, this woman took on to her own self, jumping onto a bench, holding a child. Stupid. But, I've been out to the Grand Canyon and I've seen people like dangling over the side walls of Grand Canyon. One little misstep or something happens to you, get a Charlie horse or something, you're going to go down into the ravine. So, people do some dumb things as well. It's a shame.
Same thing. It truly is. People do stupid things, and some of them live to brag about it, I guess. and some of them don't make it. But just a shame. And why do they have picnic tables that close to a railing? Then I mean, I would imagine that they'll be moving that uh, picnic tables away from that railing, or you know what, put up a net then, like they had to do for the foul balls. Put up they're gonna have to put us in like a cage. I think when you go into a ballpark, you used to be able to see everything, and now I think they're gonna have to put netting all over the place.
Yeah, it just seems so silly, for that to take place. But
I agree.
yeah, your bench movement would be a step in the right direction, I guess. You try to make places for people to sit down and eat and enjoy a snack as you go to the ballpark and stuff. You don't anticipate these kind of things happening, and just a tragedy all around. Hate to see and hear things like this. It's just something that shouldn't happen, and what a shame. But that's life, and
And yeah,
some things happen. Can't explain them.
yep, can't explain them, can't control them, right, Rich?
Yeah. Well, we thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show, the Game 162 edition. We're heading into the playoffs after today, and we got a couple hours to go before it all starts. And I'll be tuning in to baseball, football. My clicker will be working overtime today, Gary.
Yeah, yes, it will, Rich. You'll be going back and forth, and I'll be doing the same. But we'll see how it all shakes out. It's going to be interesting.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week on the Baseball Talk Radio Show.